The Emperor of 3 galaxies stood alone before the throne spire's panoramic window, staring into a sky that was never truly dark. The stars of the Central Galactic Empire burned like captured suns arranged for his pleasure, a constellation forged through blood, obedience, and centuries of conquest. And yet, tonight they felt distant. Distant in a way that pressed against his ribs like a hand intent on breaking them. Valtor exhaled slowly. His breath thawed the transparent alloy for an instant before the pains his temperature regulators cleared it away. Even his breath was not allowed to linger here. Behind him, the throne hall kilometers of polished obsidian, banners woven from light, and air thick with the quiet hum of gravity-forged engines, was utterly silent. The silence of absolute rule. The silence of an empire that had forgotten what it meant to fear. "Your Majesty," murmured a voice at the door. Valtor didn't turn. He recognized the cadence, the soft scrape of armored boots, the subtle tremor the officer was trying to hide. Fear. Fear in the capital. Fear reaching him. That was the warning that crept up his spine. "Speak, Commander Relvek." The commander swallowed, his reflection flickering in the Emperor's window like a ghost drawn thin by duty. "Another fleet, sire. Task Force Zephyra. It hasn't reported in. Not even a distress ping." Valtor closed his eyes for a moment, letting the cold weight of that settle. Zephyra wasn't a patrol fleet. It wasn't a scouting detachment. It was an armada, one of the Empire's iron fists. "How long since contact?" he asked. 16 hours, Majesty. 16 hours of silence in a region that should have been a pasture for the Empire. 16 hours with no debris signatures detected, no final logs, no emergency warp beacons, nothing. As if the fleet had been erased from existence. As if someone had reached into the dark and cut them out of reality. Valtor inhaled sharply. "And the location of their last verified jump?" Relvek hesitated. "Just a flicker." But Valtor noticed everything. "The Sol Frontier, sire, of course. The last free star system. The insignificant, stubborn collection of worlds whose inhabitants still called themselves humans." Valtor frowned. "Show me." The lights dimmed as the ceiling dissolved into a holographic star map. A single region pulsed in red, the frontier he had long avoided simply because it amused him to let it exist. The Sol system had no empire, no sprawling fleets, no ancient megastructures left behind by forgotten deities. Only one stubborn species that refused every demand for submission. Humans, microscopic on the interstellar scale. Still using jump drives his empire had abandoned centuries ago. Still praying to gods no one had ever seen. Still fighting, still dreaming. He admired that once. Long ago. Before his ambition outgrew admiration. Now he felt irritation more than anything. "A primitive world destroys Zephyra's armada?" he scoffed quietly. "Impossible." Relvek lowered his eyes. "Majesty, with respect. This makes the third armada in 6 days. 6 days. 3 armadas vanished." Valtor's jaw tightened. A slow, cold anger seeped through him. Not hot enough to ignite violence, but sharp enough to sharpen thought. His anger always made him think clearer. "Run the projections," he said. The map shifted. Red markers blinked, representing the lost fleets. Their disappearance patterns formed a shape and encirclement. Something was hunting his forces one cluster at a time. "Not random," Valtor murmured. "No, sire." The commander's voice wavered again. This time, the Emperor heard the fear plainly. Not fear of him, but fear of whatever waited in the dark beyond the Empire's borders. A thought whispered in Valtor's mind, one he despised. What if it wasn't impossible? He forced the idea away. Prepare the Imperial Council. At once. Then, expression sharpening. And send word to the Inquisition to verify the data. "We confirm every detail before the court hears it." Relvek nodded and retreated. The doors sealed with a whisper. Valtor remained with the stars. He stared at the glowing point labeled Solar Sun, much like the one he was born under, though he would never admit the comparison. A primitive system. A relic, barely a footnote in the grand design of the Empire. And yet, a memory surfaced, unbidden. An old archival report shredded by time and bureaucracy claiming humans had once repelled an ancient extragalactic predator through sheer desperation and ingenuity. The Empire dismissed it as myth. Humans spinning tailies to pretend they mattered. Valtor once believed that too. Tonight he wasn't sure. He pressed a hand to the glass, palm against the cold stars. "If you are playing games with me, little humans." His voice fell to a whisper. "I will show you what it means to challenge the throne of 3 galaxies." But the words echoed hollow. Because somewhere inside him, a place he rarely admitted existed, he felt something else. A tension, a pressure. Like the universe holding its breath. As if an unseen hand nudged the balance. The Emperor straightened abruptly, displeased by the notion. He didn't believe in gods, not anymore. He worshipped power, conquest, will, and yet he had seen too many soldiers survive impossible battles with whispered prayers on their lips. He had seen starstorms part around refugee fleets like an invisible mercy guided them. He'd never say it aloud, but some part of him wondered if the humans were arrogant, or if they knew something he did not. Humans prayed, humans believed. Humans fought like there was someone listening. The thought irritated him. "Faith is a weakness," he hissed under his breath. Even so, the unease didn't leave him. If anything, it grew. Suddenly, the map flickered. A new signal appeared, faint, unstable. A distress burst. Valtor's heartbeat kicked. "Source, Task Force Zephyr," the AI intoned. "Origin, Edge of Soul Frontier," the signal crackled. A voice tore through the static, ragged, terrified. "This is Captain Eric's Zephyr. If anyone receives asterisk, it is not a fleet. Asterisk, it is one ship one. I've never seen God's preserve." A scream, metal tearing, then silence. Valtor's skin prickled. One ship? The Empire had crushed civilizations with planets for warships. It commanded dreadnoughts the size of moons. Entire armadas were shaped from dark matter and neutron-forged alloy. But a single Terran vessel, if that was indeed what it was, just erased an armada designed for planetary suppression. His blood chilled. He whispered to himself, "One ship can't do this." But the universe did not bend to his beliefs. It bent to truth. Valtor turned away from the window. The hall stretched long and dark behind him, like the throat of a beast he had fed for a lifetime but never feared. For the first time, it felt like the beast was staring back. He began walking toward the throne, cloak trailing like a shadow struggling to keep up. He did not hurry. Emperors never hurried. But his steps were harder, sharper, as if each one fought a thought trying to surface. What if humans didn't survive by accident? What if something helped them endure when they should have vanished? He pushed the thought down again. He would crush Soul, exterminate their resistance, erase the humiliation of 3 missing armadas. And yet, under that anger, in the deepest chamber of his mind, a whisper remained unwelcome, persistent. What if their God is real? And what if he is watching? Valtor stopped at the foot of his throne, a single Terran ship. 3 lost armadas, the Sol system blazing defiantly against the dark. Something was coming, something he did not understand. Something that made the Emperor of 3 galaxies feel very, very small. He sat slowly, fingers tightening around the throne's cold armrests. "Summon the War Council," he said. But the whisper in his mind spoke louder. "You are not ready." Valtor's jaw locked. He wasn't accustomed to feeling powerless. He wasn't accustomed to being warned. The throne room dimmed as a hologram of Soul expanded before him, glowing like a torch carried by a species that refused extinction. A primitive sun, a fragile world, a stubborn race. And somewhere in that system, a warship that should not exist. Valtor stared at it for a long time. Then the lights flickered. For a second less than a heartbeat, the Emperor felt something. A presence. A pressure of awareness, not physical, not measurable, but vast. As if the universe itself was watching him back. He inhaled sharply, shaken despite himself. It passed. He straightened, forcing steel back into his voice. "Prepare everything," he ordered. But an unease curled through his chest like smoke. Something was happening in Seoul. Something beyond weaponry, beyond physics, beyond the reach of his empire. And he knew, deep down, beneath pride, beneath the iron mask he wore, this was only the beginning. Far beyond the Emperor's throne, in the quiet cradle of Seoul, a lone human warship awakened, and its captain whispered a prayer into the dark. The void was silent except for the faint hum of the Aegis Sol. It moved like a shadow slicing through the scattered light of distant suns, the nebula-strewn frontier of Seoul whispering around its hull. For centuries, humanity had trained, planned, and whispered old prayers. Now, for the first time, all of that preparation converged into a single point of focus. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the display. Every sensor, every readout, every anomaly fed into his consciousness like the pulse of a living organism. The Imperial fleets were approaching wave upon wave of destruction, each stronger than the last, each a planet killer in its own right. But Ward did not flinch. He had faith, not blind, not naive, but carved from centuries of human stubbornness, ingenuity, and survival against impossible odds. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, voice calm but carrying the weight of inevitability, "prepare orbital defense arrays. Activate stealth displacement on the outer hull. Every solar signature must be masked." "Yes, sir," she replied, fingers flying over the control panel, eyes sharp and calculating. "They'll think we're still scattered colonies." Ward nodded. He didn't need confirmation. Every human aboard the Aegis Sol understood the gravity of the moment. They weren't fighting for glory. They weren't fighting for conquest. They were fighting for survival. For the right to exist in a galaxy that had never hesitated to erase the inconvenient. "Captain," Vance said, glancing at the trajectory map, "Task Force Zephyr is the closest." They formed a battle line. Almost within strike range, Ward's gaze hardened. "Let them approach." Vance's brow furrowed. "Sir, they'll detect us." "That's the point," Ward interrupted. He leaned forward, his hands braced on the railing. "They need to feel the threat before they understand it. Fear is the first weapon we wield." The bridge went silent, the crew collectively holding their breaths. Even the Aegis Sol seemed to sense the tension. The ship thrummed with potential energy, like a predator coiled before a strike. At the edge of the Seoul frontier, Imperial cruisers glimmered against the void, hundreds of them. Their dark hulls reflected the light of distant stars in sharp, angular lines. They were the epitome of order, of control, of tyranny. And they were arrogant enough to assume the humans had no means of fighting back. Ward allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to cross his lips. "They underestimate us, always." He gestured toward the tactical map. "Phase 1, isolation. We pick one cruiser from the center. We disable their command network without alerting the others. Precision over power." Lieutenant Vance blinked. "Sir, you want us to—" "What? Infiltrate the network remotely?" Ward's gaze swept over her. "Not infiltrate. Overwhelm. Confuse. Their systems are vast but rigid. Humans thrive in chaos. Let them think the Armada is functioning. While we remove the pieces that matter." The bridge hummed with the sudden electric charge of anticipation. This wasn't a battle, yet it was a prelude. A test of human cunning against galactic might. Ward exhaled, eyes narrowing. He could feel it, the invisible weight of destiny pressing against the deck beneath him. Somewhere in the ship's deep structure, the core pulsed, responding to his resolve. As though it sensed the stakes as acutely as he did. "Prepare the pulse array," he said, voice low. "Target the lead cruiser's subspace conduit. In 5 minutes, the Imperials will learn what it means to misjudge humans." Vance hesitated. "Sir, if they survive." "They won't," Ward replied simply. He didn't need to add that humans weren't perfect, but when they survived, it wasn't by luck. It was by will, by creativity, by refusing to kneel. The Aegis Sol shifted slightly, aligning its hull with invisible vectors, only its eye understood. The pulsar ray glowed faintly, weaving strands of light that shimmered like threads of destiny. Ward felt it through the soles of his boots, a vibration not mechanical, but spiritual. He did not call it luck nor courage. He called it necessity. The first pulse fired. Across the void, a lead Imperial cruiser shuddered violently, its systems screaming as electronic circuits sparked and twisted. Energy shields flickered. Weapons arrays spun uselessly. The eye aboard the vessel Imperial Standard, optimized for war, immune to panic, stuttered, malfunctioning under the unexpected intrusion. Ward watched the bridge display with clinical detachment, not glee, not satisfaction, observation, precision. Another pulse followed. The cruiser's engines went offline. It drifted helplessly, a single luminous target among hundreds of hunters. Then, with a deft flick of his hand, Ward ordered the secondary pulse. It was beautiful in its efficiency. The lid cruiser exploded in a silent bloom of fire and metal, fragments scattering like cosmic confetti across the darkness. Sensors aboard the remaining ship screamed as the signal of destruction propagated, not with chaos, but with a certainty that chilled the commanders in distant fleets. Ward exhaled slowly. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2, disruption. Draw them apart. Make them fight shadows. The crew moved with the fluid synchronicity of people who had trained, adapted, and survived together. Every action was measured, every command precise. Every human aboard the bridge understood the stakes. Failure was annihilation. Far above, the Emperor Valtor watched the data feed from the capital's monitoring arrays, his lips pressed into a thin line. Deep in the back of his mind, an ancient memory whispered, a warning long buried under conquest and ambition. Never underestimate the creatures that prey while facing annihilation. The Aegis Sol, imperceptible to most sensors, carved a path through the Imperial formation. One cruiser after another succumbed to subtle surgical strike systems destabilized, engines fried, communications obliterated. Each attack was brief, almost invisible, yet devastating in impact. And yet the humans did not celebrate. Ward remained focused, calm, almost eerily still amidst the unfolding chaos. His eyes did not flinch when the sensors registered the first return fire plasma lances that burned bright but struck nothing. They had aimed at shadows. Phase 3, Ward murmured to himself. Let them see the impossibility. The pulsar rays charged once more. Energy flowed through the ship as if through living veins, guided by Ward's will and the uncanny intelligence of the core. The Aegis Sol moved like a phantom predator among the Imperial Armada, striking not with brute force, but with surgical precision and timing only humans could execute. Intuition, ingenuity, audacity. Each Imperial officer witnessing the destruction aboard their monitors felt it terror, not of death, but of disbelief. They had studied humans for centuries, cataloged every behavior, every tendency. And yet here, in the cold expanse of Sol's frontier, the humans had rewritten every expectation. On the bridge of the Aegis Sol, Ward allowed himself the smallest trace of a smile. Not because of victory, there was none yet, but because of something deeper. The human spirit had survived again. Against impossible odds. Against gods and emperors alike. Then, as the last cruiser in the first engagement crumbled into brilliant fragments, Ward paused. His eyes lifted to the stars. Prepare for the next wave, he said, voice calm, unwavering. Somewhere in the void, a distant pulse echoed, not from the ship, not from the fleet, but from the universe itself. Ward felt it like a brush of wind against skin, subtle, silent, vast. The humans were not alone. And as the Sol system trembled, preparing for the onslaught of Imperial vengeance, Ward whispered another prayer, short, quiet, and utterly human. Not luck. Someone wants us to survive. As the first Imperial armada lay in ruin, the Emperor of 3 galaxies realized something terrifying. The humans were not just fighting, they were rewriting the rules of war. Across 3 galaxies, the word spread like a virus in silence. Not through proclamations or broadcasts, the Empire's fleets were built to obey. Not to speak, but through the data streams leaking from destroyed armadas, fragmented logs that survived in tiny, scattered shards. One human warship, single-handed, entire fleet annihilated. In the Emperor's war chamber, Valtor leaned over the holodable, his fingers brushing the glowing representations of destroyed ships. Hundreds of vessels reduced to rubble by a craft barely larger than his personal shuttle. His generals and ministers hovered behind him, whispering useless suggestions, pointing at fragments of star maps, all of it meaningless. "You see it, Majesty?" Vorkar asked, voice strained, sweat beading along his armored forehead. All 3 waves. Gone. Incapacitated. Destroyed. There's no pattern we can counter. Valtor's eyes were fixed on a flickering point of white on the map, the location of the Aegis Sol. It pulsed like a heartbeat, small, insignificant, human, alive. He had faced death before. He had bled planets dry, extinguished billions, and shattered civilizations. He had stared into the abyss and ordered it to obey him. And yet, he felt a tremor in his chest, deep and human, that no throne, no empire, no centuries of conquest could suppress. This was not merely a threat to his fleets. It was a challenge to everything he had built. "Prepare the Inquisitors," he commanded, voice low but iron-tipped, "and bring the Dark Eclipse dreadnoughts online. All jump corridors cleared. Every fleet under my command will converge on Sol. I want humanity crushed before it realizes its own audacity." Selvar stepped forward, her mask reflecting the glow of the holomap. "Majesty, even if you deploy everything, even if you marshal the 3-fold armadas, the energy signature of this ship, this anomaly, is unlike anything we've faced. The systems don't obey conventional physics. They anticipate. They adapt." Valtor's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt faster. We crush them." And yet, as he spoke, he felt the whisper again, curling at the edges of his mind. "You are not ready." He ignored it. Back at the edge of Sol, Captain Ward and the crew of the Aegis Sol did not pause. Every sensor screamed with approaching vessels, tens of thousands of Imperial ships weaving into complex formations, converging like tides on a fragile shore. But the humans were not afraid. They had never known fear that could not be harnessed, transformed into action. Lieutenant Vance's hands flew across the consoles. "Captain, the 2nd wave is in visual range. Full orbital bombardment range. They're expecting us to retreat." Ward shook his head. "Retreat is a human concept for cowards. We fight, always. If they think we'll run, we only make them bolder." The Aegis Sol shifted silently, sliding between asteroids, coalescing nebula dust into deceptive patterns, hiding like a predator among its prey. The ship's eye hummed low, patient, intelligent, anticipating Imperial maneuvers before they were fully executed. "Activate adaptive decoys," Ward commanded, "and trigger localized electromagnetic pulses, just enough to scramble targeting arrays, nothing more. Let them learn they are vulnerable." Across the void, Imperial destroyers fired. Plasma streams lanced the darkness, cutting lines of light through empty space. They were precise, deadly, relentless. The Aegis Sol weaved, not through speed alone, but through anticipation. Patterns of movement that seemed to anticipate each attack before it even began. Fragments of debris, artificially illuminated, misled the targeting computers. Shadow after shadow appeared where the ship was not. "Phase 2, Ward murmured. "Now." And with a pulse unlike any before, The Aegis Sol unleashed a directed wave of energy that tore through the formation. Systems overloaded, weapon arrays flared into molten sparks, engines erupted in bursts of plasma. Another armada fell silent in the void. The humans did not cheer. They exhaled, barely audibly, relief tempered with the knowledge that more was coming. Ward's eyes caught a glint on the main viewplate. One Imperial commander, observing the destruction from his flagship, leaned forward in disbelief, whispering words Ward could not hear but understood all too well. Impossible. Humans thrived on impossibility. Valtor did not sleep. He paced the obsidian floors of the throne spire. Holomaps blinked, displaying fleets destroyed, destroyed again, and yet still approaching. The pulse of the Aegis Sol's energy signature resonated in the Empire's monitoring arrays like a warning drum. He had felt that presence before. That subtle, ancient weight pressing against the edges of reason. "You know," Selvar said softly, stepping beside him, "humans pray. Even in the face of annihilation. Perhaps it is not their ship that strikes fear, but the spirit behind it." Valtor's jaw clenched. He wanted to dismiss her words. He wanted to say that gods were fiction, belief irrelevant. But in the flickering holograms, among the shattered fleets, he could not deny the pattern. Humans survived where no one else would. Humans adapted where no algorithm could predict. Humans endured, as if guided by something unseen. The thought made him angry and unsettled. Angry because it could not be controlled. "Send everything," he barked finally, voice louder than intended. "Every dreadnought, every hammer fleet, every weapon buried since the first age of expansion. Leave nothing in reserve. I want Sol broken, its people kneeling." Selvar hesitated, then inclined her head. "As you command, Majesty. But the humans may not kneel." Even then, Valtor ignored the warning, yet deep inside, a small cold corner of his mind whispered a truth he could not speak aloud. They might be beyond the reach of your empire. The Aegis Sol prepared for the next engagement. Captain Ward walked the bridge slowly, touching the railings as though drawing strength from the ship itself. He did not glance at the approaching dreadnoughts. He did not flinch at the size of the armadas converging from 3 galactic sectors. This was humanity's moment, the culmination of centuries of survival, ingenuity, and stubborn faith. And yet, Ward felt the quiet weight of responsibility settle in his chest. Every life in the Sol system depended on the decisions he would make in the next few minutes. One misstep, one miscalculation, and the frontier would burn. Lieutenant Vance glanced at him, worry lining her face. "Captain, can we really hold them?" Ward's eyes were steady, fixed on the darkness beyond the viewport. "We hold," he said softly, "because humans never surrender. And sometimes, survival is enough to change the course of history." A single pulse of energy from the ship's core rippled through space. A silent warning. The Imperial fleets felt it instantly, their instruments detecting something beyond understanding. The humans had awakened a force not merely of technology, but of will. And somewhere unseen, the universe shifted as if acknowledging it. Ward exhaled. "Engage." The first Imperial dreadnought screamed as energy tore through its hull. Lights exploded across the void. A ship that should have been unassailable fell silent. The bridge of the Aegis Sol remained calm, human hands guiding the unimaginable. The war had truly begun. As the galaxy's most powerful fleets fell one by one, Emperor Valtor realized the unthinkable. Humanity's cunning, courage, and faith were rewriting the rules of war, and no dreadnought. The darkness between the stars rippled with fire and light. Imperial dreadnoughts fell in patterns no tactician had ever predicted. The pulse arrays, guided by Captain Ward and the sentient intelligence of the Aegis Sol, struck with surgical precision. Fleet after fleet disintegrated, not through sheer firepower, but by exploiting the rigid predictability of the Empire's tactics. On the bridge of the Aegis Sol, Ward moved like a conductor, orchestrating chaos into strategy. Every crew member was attuned to his rhythm. The ship's eye responded with a near-living awareness, shifting power, anticipating attacks, and even subtly guiding Ward's decisions, as if the vessel itself were alive. "Phase 3 is ready," Lieutenant Vance said, voice tight with concentration. Her fingers hovered over the command console. "We can force the Imperial formations to fracture, isolating each sector for surgical strikes." Ward nodded, eyes fixed on the display. He didn't smile. There was no victory, yet only survival. "Do it. Remember, humans survive by thinking beyond what they expect of us." The Aegisol surged forward, almost slipping through the void like a phantom. Holographic decoys flickered around it, creating multiple false targets. Dreadnoughts fired at shadows, their super lasers slicing nothing but empty space. Ward's crew watched as entire formations unraveled, controlled chaos orchestrated by human ingenuity. The Emperor Valtor watched from his war throne. The pulse waves of destruction reached him even across light years, the data feed confirming what he refused to believe. Fleets that had conquered entire galaxies now lay in ruins. His hands gripped the armrests so tightly that metal groaned. "This is impossible," he muttered, voice low but strained. "A single ship." Against all of this, Selvar stepped close, silent but perceptive. "Majesty, humans always survive where they should perish. Perhaps it is not strength alone that guides them." He shot her a sharp look, anger and disbelief warring in his chest. "Do not speak of gods." She inclined her head subtly. "Not gods, Majesty. Order, pattern, providence, some intelligence beyond our understanding." "Enough," Valtor snapped. But deep inside, a cold awareness settled, unshakable. "They are not ordinary, and I have never faced the ordinary in battle." In the void, the Imperial fleet struggled to regroup. Commanders barked orders, yet their subspace networks failed them. Systems fried, sensors flared. Their communications were riddled with feedback. Confusion became panic, panic became destruction. Ward felt the surge of each wave of energy through the ship. Each strike was not random, it was choreographed, deliberate, and deeply human in its creativity. No calculation could predict the next move. No algorithm could cope with the adaptability of human decision-making under pressure. "Another wave inbound," Vance reported. "This is the main assault. Dreadnought-class ships, planet-class artillery carriers. Everything they have left." Ward didn't flinch. "Then we finish this now. Use everything, but preserve the system. Every life matters, even the smallest outposts. Humans fight to survive, not to destroy." He paused, fingers brushing the railing of the bridge. For a moment, he allowed himself the faintest connection to the quiet presence he had felt since awakening the ship. It was subtle, a whisper in the marrow, a sense of alignment with something vast, patient, and unwavering. He didn't name it. He didn't need to. "Prepare the core resonance," he ordered. "We'll need the full adaptive harmonics." Vance's eyes widened. That will leave us exposed, sir. The entire fleet will see us coming." "Good," Ward replied simply. "Let them see humanity unafraid." The core pulsed. A hum grew from the ship's depths, vibrating through the hull and into the void. Lights shifted in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow fully. The ship's energy resonated outward, bending light and matter in ways that defied physics. Imperial sensors misread it as multiple ships, each indistinct, impossible to target. The first dreadnought of the main wave opened fire, unleashing streams of plasma. The beam struck what appeared to be hull, only to pass through thin air, harmlessly dispersing. Another dreadnought fired, and then another, their combined power concentrated, yet futile. Ward watched silently, observing the pattern. Then, with a subtle gesture, the Aegisol released a synchronized harmonic pulse. The energy sliced through the Imperial vessel's shields like a scythe, unraveling their energy matrices from the inside. Systems overloaded. Engines failed. Communications disintegrated into white noise. The main assault was annihilated in minutes. Not through brute force, but through intellect, ingenuity, and the human ability to adapt faster than the Empire could predict. Vance leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. We did it, sir." "All of them gone." Ward's gaze remained forward. "Not yet. There are more to come, and they will not stop. But humans survive. That is our advantage." Across the galaxy, the Emperor Valtor sank into his throne. He had built an empire on fear, on inevitability. And yet, nothing had prepared him for this. Humans who refused to be predictable, who refused to bow, who turned survival itself into a weapon against the tyrannical will of 3 galaxies. He realized with a rare clarity that his empire was encountering not merely opposition, but defiance rooted in something far older and deeper than any warship or dreadnought could measure: faith, ingenuity, persistence. Humans embodied it all. He pressed his palms against the cold armrests, staring into the holomap of Sol. The white pulse of the Aegis Sol glimmered defiantly. His mouth tightened. The words he wanted to speak would not come. There were no orders left that could undo what humans had done in hours that should have been their annihilation. Even now, deep in the Emperor's chest, the whisper lingered. "You may be mighty, but you are not inevitable." Somewhere on the Aegis Sol, Ward allowed himself a quiet smile. He did not speak. He did not celebrate. Instead, he looked out into the stars, feeling the weight of every human life he had sworn to protect. They had survived another impossible moment. And yet, the storm was far from over. The pulse of the ship's core throbbed beneath him, a reminder that survival required constant vigilance, constant thought, constant courage. "Prepare for their next move," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They will come again. And we will be ready." The bridge was silent. Yet the universe itself seemed to pause, listening. Something unseen, something vast, seemed to acknowledge that humans had made a stand, not through luck, not through overwhelming force, but through willpower, intelligence, and a courage that refused to yield. And in that quiet understanding, Ward whispered a prayer. "Thank you for giving us the strength to survive." As the remnants of the Imperial fleets retreated, wounded and humiliated, Valtor realized a terrifying truth. Humanity's fight was not just for survival, it was a lesson in defiance that no empire could suppress. Valtor had ruled 3 galaxies, each a crown of conquest polished by fear, strategy, and ruthlessness. Worlds bowed before him. Entire species were catalogued, their fates determined, their resistance crushed before they could dream of rebellion. Yet here he stood on the obsidian floors of the throne spire, and he realized that all his power, all his fleets, all his plans had failed. The Aegis Sol had proven that one human mind, one human crew, and one human ship could dismantle centuries of calculated dominance. The Emperor's hands curled into fists. He stared at the holomap. Scattered fleets, ruined armadas, shattered dreadnoughts. Data fragments flickered in chaotic streams across the display, highlighting the losses in every sector. And at the center of it all pulsed a solitary point of white light human, defiant, alive. Selva approached cautiously, her mask reflecting the flickering images of destruction. "Majesty." The humans, this single vessel, its energy signature continues to grow. It adapts faster than any simulation we have. They are not merely surviving, they are evolving in real time. Valtor turned sharply. "And yet, I am Emperor. Every world, every star, every fleet subject to me. There is no force in the universe that can escape my command." Selvar hesitated, then whispered, almost to herself, "Perhaps not every force." "Majesty," the Emperor's gaze narrowed. "Explain." "They are human," Selvar said quietly. "And humans, they defy inevitability. Their resilience, ingenuity, and cohesion cannot be fully predicted. Perhaps not even by you." Valtor's jaw tightened. He hated uncertainty. He hated it like a poison seeping into his veins. And yet, he could not deny it. Humanity's courage had exposed a flaw even in his empire, his own expectation that dominance alone was enough. He strode to the edge of the holomap, eyes tracing the solitary pulse of the Aegis-Sol. He could almost feel the ship's presence, not as a mechanical mass, but as an entity, a force of will, carrying the hopes, fears, and determination of an entire species. His own voice, lower than he intended, betrayed the shadow of fear. How is this possible? One ship, one species? And yet they stand unbroken. Salvar's voice was steady. Because they fight not just with weapons, Majesty. They fight with persistence, creativity, faith. Even in the void, they find guidance. Something greater than themselves. Perhaps even God. They survive where logic says they should fall. Valtor turned, his cold eyes meeting hers. Do you imply divinity favors them? No, Salvar said, bowing her head slightly. But perhaps the universe itself aligns with those who refuse to yield. The Emperor's chest tightened. Pride, fear, disbelief. They twisted together in an unfamiliar knot. He had ruled through power, terror, and calculation. Yet here was a species, flawed, mortal, and tiny by comparison, shaping fate itself. Prepare the Sanctum Fleet, he ordered, voice sharper now. Every dreadnought, every black matter array, every subspace hammer. We will not fail again. We will crush humanity. Salvar inclined her head, but said nothing. Even she understood that fleets alone could no longer guarantee victory. There was something in these humans, something beyond technology, beyond strategy, that challenged the very essence of imperial domination. Meanwhile, across the void, the Aegis-Sol drifted among the scattered remnants of the imperial fleets. Captain Ward stood at the forward viewport, eyes scanning the horizon. He knew the Emperor would not relent. More fleets, more weapons, more calculated destruction would come. Lieutenant Vance approached quietly. Captain, the data streams show massive fleet mobilization. They're preparing for everything. Ward didn't flinch. Then we will be ready. Humanity survives by adapting faster than the enemy can predict. That's our advantage. Vance hesitated. And if they bring everything they have? Ward's gaze shifted to the stars, distant suns scattering light across the darkness. Then we fight. Not because we are the strongest, not because we are perfect, but because we refuse to kneel. We endure, we survive. And sometimes, that's enough to change the course of history. The Aegis-Sol pulsed, as if affirming his words. Its core thrummed with quiet, intelligent awareness. Ward felt it, an unseen partnership between human will and something larger, something guiding their path. He did not name it. He did not need to. Prepare the adaptive resonance, Ward said softly. If they come for us, we will meet them on our terms. And if the universe has a plan, we will honor it by surviving. Vance's fingers flew across the controls. Adaptive resonance ready. Shields and pulse arrays aligned. Weapons primed. Ward exhaled, a quiet resolve settling into his chest. They had survived every impossible moment so far. Every fleet, every weapon, every strategy the Emperor had thrown at them had failed. And yet, he knew this was only the beginning. In the distance, the pulse of the Aegis-Sol glimmered like a heartbeat among the stars, a defiance the Emperor could feel even from light years away. Valtor would come again. He always came again. And humanity would have to stand, not just with weapons, but with cunning, courage, and the relentless persistence that had carried them this far. Ward allowed himself one fleeting thought, whispered as he stared into the endless void. They may have power, we have will. Is unstoppable. As Valtor marshaled his ultimate fleet, the humans prepared their counterstrike, a gambit that would decide not just the fate of Sol, but the future of all who dared defy an empire. The void trembled with the shadow of 1,000 warships. Valtor had called upon his ultimate fleet, the Dark Eclipse dreadnoughts, black matter carriers, and the most ancient weapons buried in Imperial vaults for centuries. They surged through the jump corridors like a tide of black steel and death, converging on Sol with one goal: total annihilation. On the bridge of the Aegis Sol, the crew moved with quiet intensity. Every station was alive with activity, every sensor tuned to catch the faintest anomaly. Captain Ward stood at the center, eyes locked on the approaching constellation of destruction. "Sir," Lieutenant Vance said, voice tight, "they've consolidated their fleet. The main armada is massive. Full-spectrum weaponry, subspace hammer arrays, planet killers, orbital annihilators." Ward's gaze remained steady. "Then we do not wait. We engage on our terms. Humanity survives by turning the impossible into opportunity. That is our advantage." The ship thrummed as Ward's hand brushed the console, feeling the pulse of its intelligence as a living rhythm. The core of the Aegis Sol responded, aligning its energy harmonics, its adaptive resonance beginning to weave a lattice of defense and offense across the void. "Prepare the initial strike," Ward ordered. "Use stealth decoys, adaptive energy pulses, and divide their formations. We force them to scatter before they can strike effectively." Vance hesitated. "Captain, even with decoys and pulses, their numbers, humanity thrives in chaos," Ward interrupted softly. "They've never seen what humans can do when backed into the edge of annihilation." Across the void, the Imperial fleets converged. Massive dreadnoughts bristled with weapons, energy shields flaring in anticipation of human resistance. Valtor observed from the flagship Obsidian throne, eyes cold but thoughtful. "This is their final lesson," he said to Selvar, who hovered beside him. "No species survives this strike. We bring Sol to its knees." Selvar's voice was quiet. "Majesty, they are not just resisting. They are anticipating. Every engagement has been beyond prediction." Valtor clenched his fists. "Then we change the rules. If humans cannot be predicted, we overwhelm them. Absolute force." The order echoed through the fleet. A symphony of destruction answered. Plasma lances blazed, orbital cannons charged, and subspace hammers roared. The void seemed to vibrate with the anticipation of death. Yet the Aegis Sol moved with the patience of predators stalking prey. Every maneuver Ward executed was calculated not to survive, but to shape the battlefield. Decoy after decoy drew fire. Pulses of adaptive energy neutralized targeting arrays before weapons could lock. "Phase 1 complete," Ward said quietly. "Phase 2, disruption. Divide and isolate." Vance's fingers flew over the controls, guiding pulse streams through the hull into vectors that scrambled the Imperial formation. Ships collided, energy discharges erupted in the void, and fleets that should have been cohesive were now scattered and vulnerable. Ward leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He felt it again, that subtle presence, guiding them, unseen yet undeniable. Not luck, not coincidence, something greater shaping survival. "Phase 3, he whispered. "Engage the counterstrike." The Aegis Sol released a coordinated barrage of precision strikes, not to destroy everything, but to disable key command nodes across the Imperial fleets. Dreadnoughts faltered. Weapon arrays misfired. The largest carriers were forced into evasive maneuvers, disoriented and vulnerable. Across the void, Valtor's calm, disciplined officers began to panic. He had ruled through order and inevitability for centuries. And now, the humans had shown him that his power could be nullified not through overwhelming force, but through audacious, intelligent resistance. Valtor's voice trembled ever so slightly. They adapt faster than logic allows." Selvar did not answer. Even she understood the enormity of what she witnessed. The battle reached its zenith as Ward guided the Aegis Sol into the heart of the Imperial formation. A single pulse of adaptive resonance detonated in the core of the fleet, cascading across every dreadnought, hammer array, and carrier. Energy shields collapsed in unison. Engines failed. Communications dissolved into white noise. The bridge of the Emperor's flagship shook. Data streams exploded in alarm. Valtor grasped the railings, his face pale under the ghostly glow of holographic fire. "Impossible," he hissed. "A single ship, against everything." Ward's calm, measured voice echoed across the bridge of the Aegis Sol. "Not a single ship, humans, one species. And a will no one can break." The Emperor realized then that the humans' fight was more than survival, it was defiance. And the defiance was unstoppable. In the void, among the wreckage of once mighty fleets, Ward allowed himself a breath, steady and deep. Humanity had struck first, and with brilliance, but the storm was not over. More challenges would come, more fleets would rise. Yet each attack, each victory, only affirmed one truth: humans would not kneel. He glanced at Vance. "Prepare for extraction and regroup. We've made our mark. Let them know what it means to challenge humanity." Vance nodded, understanding the weight of what they had achieved. The Aegis Sol pulsed in response, a silent affirmation. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the cosmos, Ward felt it again. The subtle, guiding hand of an intelligence vast and patient, whispering through the chaos. Not a god to command them, but a presence that reminded them survival, courage, and ingenuity were never wasted. Valtor stared at the remnants of his fleets. Rage, fear, and disbelief collided inside him. For the first time in centuries, he felt something he had never known: vulnerability. The humans had done the impossible. And the galaxy had noticed. As the Imperial Empire reeled, the Emperor's throne world trembled under the threat of human ingenuity, and Captain Ward, prepared for the ultimate confrontation, one that would decide the fate of all galaxies. The capital of the Empire gleamed like a jewel of obsidian and steel, suspended in orbit above its throne planet, Valtor's seat of absolute power. Massive orbital rings bristled with weapon arrays, plasma turrets, and anti-ship mines. The Emperor's fleets had rallied in desperation, but for the first time in centuries, the galaxy's mightiest force felt fragile. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the Aegis Sol, eyes fixed on the distant lights of the throne world. Sensors had mapped every orbital defense, every convoy, every patrol route. Humanity had survived the impossible, adapted to chaos, and now faced its ultimate trial: to strike at the very heart of the Empire. Lieutenant Vance's voice broke the tense silence. "Sir, the planet is surrounded by orbital cannons, shields, and fleets. If we engage directly, we risk total annihilation." Ward did not flinch. He leaned forward, hands resting on the railing, feeling the pulse of the ship beneath him. Humanity has never waited for the perfect moment. We create it. Every risk carries opportunity. This is our chance, not to conquer, but to remind them that no empire can force submission where will refuses to bend. The bridge hummed with focused energy. Every crew member understood the stakes. Every heart, every hand, every thought was synchronized in purpose, survival, and defiance. Across the void, Emperor Valtor watched the distant pulse of the Aegis Sol on his throne world monitors. Rage and disbelief warred with a grudging respect he had never felt for any species. One ship, one human vessel, had shattered fleets, outmaneuvered dreadnoughts, and now dared to approach the very seat of his dominion. "This is madness," he said to Selvar, though his voice carried a hint of awe. "A single warship, and yet—" Selvar inclined her head. "Majesty, perhaps it is not the ship, but the spirit aboard it. Humans do not fight for dominion. They fight for survival, for ingenuity, for courage, and sometimes even for faith. That is why they endure." Valtor's fists clenched. He could not destroy what he could not predict. He could not command what defied expectation. The Aegis Sol had become more than a ship. It was a symbol, a manifestation of everything he could not control: human will, ingenuity, and refusal to bow. The Aegis Sol glided through the final sector of defenses, adaptive resonance pulsing outward to neutralize targeting arrays and misdirect orbital sensors. The first line of plasma turrets detonated harmlessly, their beams passing through false decoys. Shield harmonics flared, then collapsed, precisely timed with Ward's maneuvers. "Phase 1 complete," Ward whispered. "Phase 2, breach the orbital grid. Precision strikes only avoid civilian sectors." The crew executed with near telepathic precision. Every cannon disabled, every defense node sabotaged, and the orbital shields faltered. Imperial fleets scrambled to respond, but every move they attempted had been anticipated. The humans had turned unpredictability into a weapon. In the Emperor's throne room, Valtor's monitors showed the destruction in real time. Entire defense arrays went dark. The orbital fleet disintegrated in sudden orchestrated chaos. Valtor sank into his chair, fists gripping the armrests. As the realization struck, his seat of power, the jewel of 3 galaxies, had been breached by a single human warship. Ward's hands hovered over the console. The final pulse was ready, the one that would disable the planetary shield grid and allow a surgical bombardment on the central command complex. He glanced at his crew, eyes meeting theirs in silent acknowledgement. All of them understood that this was history in the making. "Fire," he commanded. Energy arced from the Aegis Sol toward the throne planet. Shields overloaded in brilliant cascades of light and energy. The surface of the planet trembled as orbital cannons, long considered invincible, flared and died. The Emperor's control faltered, and for the first time, Valtor's dominion truly hung by a thread. On the throne world itself, civilians, soldiers, and administrators alike looked to the sky as human ingenuity carved a path through the heavens. Panic spread, but among it, awe. Something primal had awakened in their understanding. One species, defiant, could rewrite the terms of reality. Ward's voice was steady, almost reverent. "Phase 3, precision strikes on command centers, minimize casualties. Maximize impact. Adaptive pulse arrays synchronized with gravity wells, communication relays, and defense hubs." Explosions erupted, not chaotically, but surgically. The planet shuddered. Cities illuminated with emergency lighting as power grids collapsed. Orbital defenses died. And yet, not a single human life was lost to miscalculation or hubris. Valtor's monitors showed the culmination of centuries of effort crumbling before him. His voice, once commanding, trembled with disbelief. Impossible, all of it, destroyed. By a single warship. Selvar watched him carefully, silence stretching between them. Majesty. Perhaps it is not power that rules the universe, but persistence, ingenuity, courage, and sometimes faith. The Emperor did not answer. He could not. Humanity had done what no empire, no calculation, no dreadnought could achieve. They had struck the heart of tyranny and remained unbroken. Captain Ward exhaled softly. The throne world's central command complex lay in ruins, its orbital defenses extinguished. The Aegis Sol hovered silently, its adaptive systems steady, its crew alive and resolute. Humanity had prevailed not through luck, not through overwhelming firepower, but through courage, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender. Ward looked to the stars, feeling once more the subtle weight of something vast, guiding, and unseen. Not a god to command him, but a presence that whispered through survival, ingenuity, and human will. "Not luck," he murmured. "Someone wanted us to survive." The crew allowed themselves quiet smiles, but the victory was not jubilant. It was solemn, full of the weight of what had been accomplished, and the knowledge of the battles yet to come. Humanity had struck the impossible blow. And across the galaxy, the Emperor of 3 galaxies understood, with a chilling clarity, that his reign was ending, not with a roar, but with the quiet defiance of one species that refused to kneel. The throne world burned, lights flickering and dying. Fleets had been shattered, systems destabilized, and the Emperor's dominion fractured. And somewhere, amidst the vast silent stars, humans began to pray not for victory, but in acknowledgement that even against gods and tyrants, survival, ingenuity, and courage could triumph. Power means nothing to those who refuse to kneel. Humanity endures because its spirit cannot be conquered, its will cannot be broken, and its courage transforms the impossible into the inevitable. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Where humans stand, tyranny falls, and hope endures.